You're listening to the Impact Theory Podcast, your source of empowering ideas and actionable techniques from the world's highest achievers. Join host Tom Bilyeu, serial entrepreneur and co-founder of the billion-dollar brand Quest Nutrition, on a journey to unlock your potential and realize your vision of success. Welcome to Impact Theory.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of AMA. I am here to answer your questions today. Thank you guys so much for joining me. And if you're a regular watcher of the show, you'll notice that we're on a different set today. We are on the final leg of our holiday journey here, and the team will be joining us again for the next one. But for now, we're on this set. And I'm going to be using a laptop a little bit different than what we normally do, but hopefully it will be just as amazing as it is always. So thank you guys so much for joining me, for tuning in. If you have a question, be sure to drop it into the feed. My man Chase, as always, while remote, is going to be submitting your questions. So in fact, we have one to begin with right now. Let's dive into this bad boy. And it is a question from Andrew Skotsko in the Connect inbox, which, by the way, if you guys don't know about the Connect inbox, if you ever have a question that you want to ask and you want to submit it ahead of time, you can send it to connect@impacttheory.com. All right, his question is, to call in two figures who have influenced my thinking, Cal Newport and Peter Diamandis, how do you reconcile their seemingly contradictory messages about purpose, passion? Newport talks about developing passion versus uncovering it, whereas Diamandis talks about finding your massively transformative purpose. All right, so I've read Cal Newport's book. It actually had a big influence on the way that I think about passion, and is amazing, by the way, and I highly recommend it for anybody that hasn't read his book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, and I'm sure that you've heard me say that phrase 1,000 times, which comes from my boy, the comedian, oh God, why can't I remember his name? Gray hair, hilarious, wow. That is really weird. So anyway, from the comedian who is so famous, I'm going to punch myself in the mouth at the end of this episode for not remembering. He talks about how you can cultivate your passion, which is a huge thing for me, at least as I use the words. Now, I know Peter very, very well, and I can tell you that while they use different words, they very much mean the same thing. So Peter does not see himself as an archaeologist at all. And if you look at and when I say archaeologist, what I'm talking about is there are two ways, as you outlined in this question, to really think about your passion. You've got somebody who views themselves as an archaeologist, who's turning inward, they're digging to find something that has always been there. They're uncovering this this beautiful jewel that's been hidden inside themselves forever, and somehow they didn't see it up until that moment. And then you have people who realize that they are architects and they have to build the thing that they want. Peter is very much of the architect variety, and if you look at what he's doing with his kids in terms of introducing them to a lot of things, trying to spark their curiosity. In fact, if I remember right, I asked Peter about that, and he said the one thing that he wants to do isn't force feed his kids any one thing in particular. It's simply to make sure that they're curious, that they have a love of learning. And from that, you can infer what he's really trying to do is give them that first thing that starts you down a path of really finding the things you like, and this is where it slips directly into Cal Newport's work, finding things that you resonate with through exposure. And then by really engaging with something, you realize whether or not it's something that is going to turn into a full-blown fascination. Those are my words, not Cal Newport's. And then from the fascination, you go down a process of gaining mastery. Now, this is very much Cal Newport's work. You go through a process of gaining mastery, and in that process of gaining mastery, you find out whether something is a passion or not. And see, even there, I slide into those words find, which is sort of inevitable. And I think that that's why it sounds like Peter and Cal are saying different things. We're all just conditioned with this notion of find. And there is a process of that discovery through the process of gaining mastery, but it really is through that engagement through doing that you're seeing whether or not you're getting the emotional response that you want. Now, the reason that Newport talks about needing to go through a process of gaining mastery to turn it into a passion is because you've got to recognize the connection between getting good at something and the emotional neurochemical reward that you get from, I worked my ass off to gain the skill, I worked really hard to get good at this thing, and it has real world benefit. And that emotional cycle of, whoa, I worked really hard for this, and it has real world implications, which goes back to the ancient Greek notion of techne, which is a skill set that I busted my ass to get. They don't use that phrase, but you get my meaning. I busted my ass to get this skill set, and it has real use to other people. And I think that if you put Cal, and this is admittedly me guessing, but I think if you put Cal and Peter together, that they would both be like, yeah, 100%. That's exactly how the process goes. And it really comes down to verbiage. So yeah, that's it. And looking at Peter's own life, his obsession with space and being somebody to help usher in a positive future, to help society really adapt to that and use these technologies in a way that is uplifting to humanity, that wasn't something that he was born with. That was something that, it was through his early interest in rocketry and then really engaging with that, and that moment of wonderment of watching the space program come to life. All of that stuff comes together and you get the person that you see today. But it was very much a process of first just encountering something which you could call the exploration phase, but then from that cultivating something that is that passion, fanning those flames, getting good at business in Peter's instance, and really having to develop that skill set. And it's that process of gaining mastery in which he realized that he really had a full-blown passion for it. So to bring it all around, that's why Peter uses that's why he's with his kids, he's trying to create an infatuation with learning. And from that cycle begins. So those two things aren't incongruous to me at all. In fact, I went through a very similar journey of really changing the wording that I was using, but realizing that there's nothing incongruous about those two things if you really understand the neurological process that we all go through to create something. Now, at some point, I would like to create a piece of content specifically around the how of fanning the flames of passion. That's something that people have asked me about, and it really is a mechanistic process that I go through to do that. And so one day, probably not today, but one day we will need to create something around that. All right, Steve Martin, Chase came to my aid, and it was probably there the whole time. Thank you, Chase. I'm deeply saddened by your physical absence today, but very grateful to have you in the Slack feed. All right, next question is from Raghav Rastogi. This is from YouTube. Which approach is better? Gary V's go all in and learn stuff through trial and error, or Tai Lopez's mentor and a book approach? I think you need both, to be quite frank. And I would get mentors whenever and wherever humanly possible. But if you don't understand that the very next step, and this is what Tai did, so I very much doubt Tai would disagree with this, you need to actually go and do it. So for those of you that don't know Tai's story, one, check out the episode that we did with him. It was great. He found a mentor in the field of farming who himself, and I'm forgetting his name right now, Joel Salatin, I think, went on to be very successful in his own right, ushering in, I think it's organic farming. I think, there's something else in there that's very, very popular right now that he was one of the earliest adopters of. So Tai goes, starts learning from him, and then realizes that there's a deal on the table that Joel is going to pass on. And Tai says, let me do that, which is to go open his own farm. So he asked Joel to lend him money, if I remember right, lend him some money so that he could start that. And then he had a particular deal worked out with Joel, but it gave him a chance to actually run the farm and to learn about all of the things that he needed to really get his hands on to figure out. And so that process of first mentor and then total immersion, I think is the ultimate combination. And I think both of them would agree with that. I mean, even just looking at Gary's life, he started working in his, actually that's a lie, because he started with baseball cards and all of that. Maybe they would disagree. I don't know. It's interesting. So to me, it's the combination of both. Get a mentor if you can, and then immediately move into full immersion. So yeah, I would do both. And in fact, it may be Peter that has the law. I think it is. I think it's one of Peter's laws. When given a choice between two things, take both. That would very much be my advice in this case. All right, next question is from Charles Rowe. This is on Facebook. My question is, have you ever disregarded one of your bright lines? And if so, how do you deal with that internally? Yes, there's disregarded is maybe not the right word, but like there are times, for instance, so I have a bright line that I get out of bed within 10 minutes of realizing that I'm awake. And there have been times where I will miss it by a few seconds. So as I'm standing up, I'll see the clock change to the 11th minute And I do a light form of punishment around that mentally and emotionally. And this is something that people really have to get good at. So the easiest way to explain it is on the positive side. So self-congratulatory behavior, I think, is really important for people to learn how to do very effectively. You need to be able to congratulate yourself when you do something well. So if I get out of bed in my 10-minute window where that bright line is, then you need to say like, hey, well done. You said you were going to do it and you did it. And that needs to be something that you say and repeat. And if you don't, then you need to punish yourself. And I know people get really weird about those words, but I'm just telling you what works. So I'm not passing moral judgment on whether it should work. I'm just telling you the way the human mind is work. The way the human mind works, if you have a little bit, hey, motherfucker, you said you were going to get up and you didn't, and that's shameful. And I do a thing where I force myself to admit it. So I will go and tell my wife, hey, I said I was going to get out of bed in 10 minutes and I didn't today. And it's I want to say never, which is almost certainly accurate, but just in case I'll hedge my bets and say it's almost never because I just go, fuck it. It's because I played with fire and I thought, I can get away with this. And then, I'm probably getting up close to it. And then I jump up. Now, another area that I use bright lines is food. I'm pretty religious about food. So the honest answer is I almost never break a bright line unless I have a reason that I've decided ahead of time when I'm what I call emotionally sober. So I don't in the moment go, now you can break that bright line. I wouldn't do that. That's not my thing. So like when I fast, the bright line's the bright lines. So the last time that I did a fast, actually, let's go back to the time before that. So the time before my most recent fast, in the middle of the night of the second day, I had the most brutal headache you can imagine. And I couldn't sleep because of it. And I really wanted to take Advil. But I didn't know if Advil had calories. And so I felt like I'd be violating my bright lines. And I thought I would rather suffer than break my bright lines. So it's interesting as I'm thinking through this. The answer is no. Don't break your bright lines. That is going to be problematic. You're going to lose credibility with yourself. Now, ahead of time, I will decide something. So, for instance, over the Christmas holiday here, I raised my calories, and I actually had a piece of pie, which was pretty amazing. But I had decided ahead of time that I was going to do that. So while yes, my standard bright line, if I don't cheat on my diet, I have a certain set number of calories that I'm going to have, and that's that. I decided, over the holiday break that I was going to take my calories up, and so it's been as planned. The reason that I don't break my own bright lines is because you lose credibility with yourself, which is one of the single most damaging things you could ever do to yourself, is to not believe in yourself. So you really have to cultivate that belief, but it needs to be earned. It needs to be done with small wins. This is one of the reasons that even forgetting the physical benefits and the health benefits to working out, for me, especially because I don't like it, I earn credibility with myself every day by showing up in the gym. I said I was going to do it, and here I am, I'm doing it. And so that's really, really important. And I think that doing things that break or that cause you to lose credibility with yourself are incredibly dangerous because of the knock-on effect that it has on the rest of your life. So for instance, if I were going to set a 2018 New Year's resolution, which I'm not, by the way,